Wargame Red Dragon. It's not a game. It's a lifestyle. Set in an alternate universe where the Cold War goes hot, and where everyone seemingly seems to forget about the existence of intercontinental nuclear missiles. Considering the current political climate, playing games like this can seem almost surreal. However, do not fear, as the only combatants depicted in Wargame are humanoid cyborgs, incapable of feeling pain. Most seasoned Wargame veterans spend the majority of their time settling their differences in head-to-head multiplayer combat, in between which they come together to discuss the world's most difficult political and sociological matters in the intellectual commune that is the game's global chat.
Putin has a pussy, below his cock he's self-fucking himself, smiley face.
6 trillion.
Death to Jews, our enemies. Putis.
Do you smoke weed?
Is a very tricky word.
Any Bloofer players out there want to take on a stack team with me?
Look at African.
I am black, actually.
Exactly, and you call Euro. Lol.
What's wrong with loving you, bitch?
It just goes to show that National Socialism is the way forward, especially for the white race.
Life in Auschwitz was actually very fun. Holocaust never happened.
Howdy y'all.
Holocaust might have happened. Regardless, it was a good idea.
This chat is infamous within the Wargame community. The geniuses over at Eugen Systems are clearly staunch believers in the freedom of speech, as there are zero filters for what you can say in the game chat. The best way I can describe the Wargame chat experience would be that it's just poll without the image posting. The Steam community posts are pretty good though, but if you're interested in the multiplayer side of Wargame, then this is not the video for you. Although, a lot of what I'm going to cover is also relevant to multiplayer skirmishes. I am what some might call a campaign cuck. 99% of the 350 hours that I have sunk into this game have all been spent replaying these 5 campaigns. Why is that, you might ask? Well, it's mostly because I have no friends. But it's also because the dynamic nature of the campaign system they've added in this 3rd game in the franchise makes for a slightly different experience every time you play. Allow me to show you what I mean. We're gonna be playing Thatcher's Orient for this playthrough. It's not the hardest or most complex campaign, but it's also not a walk in the park. The game sets up an alternate version of history, where instead of agreeing to wait until 1997 before they can have Hong Kong and the new territories back, China just kinda goes, why not just take it now? It's not like the British are celebrating any recent victories or anything. Each campaign has a little cinematic that explains the political context of what is going on, and some of these are better than others. It is kind of strange though, that the campaigns that have the Soviet Union and the United States fighting each other have no mention whatsoever of nuclear bombs. Alas, I digress. So we get into the tactical overview map, and those of you fine intellectual gamers who have never touched this game before might be wondering, what the fuck is all this? Well, it's actually much more simple than it looks. This is a defensive mission. This means that, in order to succeed, we will need to hold and defend a number of different sectors on the map. Hong Kong Island is our primary objective. We also have these secondary objectives. These are not critical to complete the mission, though the game will roast you at the end if you're unable to hold them. All of these cute little pawns are battalions. They have units. It's a superior version of how the battalions worked in Airland Battle, if you've played that game. But, instead of there being a separate one-on-one battle against each battalion involved in an attack, they are all instead combined into one big scrap. This does mean that you need to make sure you have enough different unit types to fight effectively. You could send in a lone support battalion to fight a massive army in a sector, but if the enemy is packing any serious tank or helicopter heat, then you're pretty much screwed. You need to combine battalions in each sector in a way where they can fight effectively, making sure you have good anti-air capabilities, as well as a good way to defend yourself from tanks and infantry. Aircraft have their own pawns now also, unlike Airland Battle. There's only one real resource that you need to worry about in the tactical overview part of the game, and that is your political power, or as I like to call it, people. These numbers to the right of your sector names tell you how much political power you will earn at the start of each turn. This can then be used to buy more battalions. And that's pretty much all of the fundamentals of the turn-based portion of the campaign system. There's a few more nuanced mechanics left, but I will get to them later. The best part is that a lot of what I have explained so far also explains a lot of the skirmish battle mechanics. We'll see what I mean in just a second. We have a number of different choices to consider right from the get-go. The Chinese have amassed their armed forces along the Hong Kong border.
Good morning, my neighbor! Yes!
And the vast majority of our units are an entire sector away. We have the following options. We can use our first turn to move forward into the two bordering sectors. This would prevent the Chinese from taking over any territory from us, though we would have to be careful about how we split up our forces, making sure we can defend ourselves properly in each sector. The good news is that the tank battalions cannot move and attack on the same turn, meaning that we do have time to move more of our own units in that are stuck even more inland. Alternatively, we could just wave goodbye to the new territories. After all, they're not providing us with any political power, meaning that they are already dead to me. This way, we can combine most of our armed forces together in one choke point sector, which should make us much more effective at defending the advancing Chinese. They will, of course, also combine their own battalions in that same sector. Now, we could just be sitting on the defensive for the entirety of the 9 turns that this campaign takes to complete. But airborne and helicopter regiments can move across water, you see. Why not cut the Chinese off from the source? Already, you might be seeing why these campaigns appeal to me so much. There are so many of these little decisions that you have to make from the very first turn. And remember, this isn't even the most complex campaign available. The Second Korean War scenario is humongous. Also a free DLC, by the way. But Climb Mount Narodnaya is probably my favorite campaign in the game. But enough of this grand strategy wannabe bullshit. Hub, my dude, show me the good stuff. So you get into your first battle, and again, if you've never played this game before, you're gonna be like, what the fuck is all this? Allow me to first of all direct your attention to the top left of the screen. Look familiar? These are your deployment points, your skirmish currency for deploying units into the battle. The amount you start with is shown on the briefing screen before launching the assault, and it can vary depending on your unit cohesion. All of the units that were present in this sector will be available here for deployment. The categories are pretty self-explanatory for the most part, with the exception of maybe logistics and support, but more on that in a second. Now let's look at these zones on the map. The blue and red colors correspond to your faction. Since we're part of Blue 4, our zones are blue. We can put units down in any of these zones during the deployment phase at the start of the game. You might notice though, as soon as you launch the battle, a lot of these zones turn white in color. What's that all about? Command vehicles are your most important unit in the game. Found in the logistics tab, they let you keep control of sectors during battles, but if your last command unit is destroyed, you lose. Instantly. It goes without saying then that protecting your command vehicles is your top priority at all times. So what zones should you be capturing? As many as possible, of course. Though in reality, this is usually pretty hard to do, and usually not really worth it. You see, similar to Tarkov servers and human life, not all zones are created equal. First, there are those zones which provide you with deployment points every 5 seconds. Then there are those that let us call in more units after the deployment phase, during the actual battle. These zones will have land and air corridors, easily distinguished with these arrows pointing into them. If you find a zone that both has corridors as well as gives you deployment points, well, then you're laughing. Just make sure to put down a command vehicle somewhere within a lot of cover, like a forest, surrounded with a couple of squads of infantry and anti-air, and you won't really have to worry about it too much. Now, there is something useful to know about the Wargame AI that may help you plan your battles more effectively. You see, they only know one tactic, and that's pressing move fast and then clicking on your zone. If unprepared, this can prove to be a surprisingly effective strategy, especially with heavily armored vehicles. However, once you know to expect it, you can take steps to crush them before they even manage to inflict any real damage on your units. The fast move mechanic is a really neat feature that lets units drive along roads on the map. They can reach faster speeds than normal while in this mode, though they are much more vulnerable as well. If I take these 2 zones at the start of the battle, then I can pretty easily predict that the AI is going to try and send units along one of these 2 roads, and I will be waiting there to greet them. There's some maps that show up in the campaign where the AI just stands absolutely zero chance in defeating you if you know where they are coming from. Some of my favorite maps have these long bridges that the AI will try to funnel units through. Meanwhile, I'll just send in jet after jet with cluster bombs to block it off with their own wrecked tanks. Remember, after taking the initial splurge on a plane, the munitions come paid for by the oblivious citizens of Britain. Use them to your heart's content. Now, there's not a lot more in-depth left to say about Wargame Skirmishes. If you've played any RTS games made within the last decade or so, then you'll already be familiar with most of this stuff. So here's some things that may not be so obvious. Most units, with the exception of helicopters and aircraft, allow for groups of up to 4 units per squad. Click on the unit you want as many times as the number you want in the squad, then place them on the map. Holding shift while placing them on the map will allow you to create multiple copies of the same unit group. 4 stacks like this are usually not recommended. 2 units per squad is the magic number. Artillery and anti-air can be found in the support tab. A single unit of infantry consists of numerous different soldiers. This ranges between 2 and 15 people in one unit. The game only counts you losing an infantry unit if all of the soldiers are wiped out to the last man. But this is also true if their vehicle is destroyed. Infantry units are always deployed in vehicles. If this vehicle is destroyed, you lose the entire infantry unit that it brought in at the end of the battle. Unlike most RTS games, units in Wargame have limited ammunition and fuel. If you have them, logistic units such as trucks and FOBs will replenish these, as well as repairing damaged units. Just take good care of them though. To win a campaign skirmish, you have to deplete your enemy's destruction points. You do this by destroying units, and the amount of points they cost to deploy gets subtracted from the enemy. If both sides fail to do this by the 20-minute time limit, you will end up with a draw. And with that, we've won our first battle. The after-action report will show you all of the units you managed to destroy, as well as any you may have lost. And this is ultimately the second big reason for why I prefer the campaigns over multiplayer. Your units will gain experience throughout battles for getting kills, and they keep this experience throughout the campaign. Units with veteran or elite experience are in general better than the same recruit or trained units. And any losses you do take in a battle are persistent throughout your campaign unless you take the time and political power to refit them, which usually cannot be done on the front line. Compare this to multiplayer, where every skirmish is an isolated event. Yes, playing against real players is a vastly more enjoyable experience, as most people generally have more tactics up their sleeve than just rush B. But the lack of any real consequences other than the mark on my win-lose ratio and potential racism in the chat just fails to keep my interest, unfortunately. If you do like the sound of multiplayer though, then this is one of the best times to get into this game. Wargame's had a massive uptick in player numbers since being added to the Epic Games Store, so it's very easy to find matches. Meanwhile, I'll be sitting here in the minority, angry about Eugen not adding any more campaigns into the game. Look, I realize that the vast majority of players do not give a single fuck about them, but they already did it once. For free. Would it really be that hard to add like a couple more campaigns to the game? A lot of nations have been added that are not being used at any of the ones currently available, and I'm not a programmer or anything, but these campaigns don't exactly look like they take 4 years of intense development to make. I would dead ass pay the cost of the game again for 2 more campaigns, and I think enough people would do that as well to the point where it's just easy money for Eugen systems. I raise you this though, I would pay half of that money for an update where you can play the campaigns we currently have on the opposite side. All of the systems should already be in place for me to play this campaign as the Chinese, or to try and play the Second Korean War map as the attacking North Koreans. With the announcement of Warno though, I've kind of lost all hope for that ever happening. If the game was any easier to mod, I'd imagine we'd already have a lot more campaigns anyway. And I can't exactly be disappointed. I mean, 350 plus hours in any game is money well spent, regardless whether you're after a single player experience or a competitive multiplayer one. Wargame Red Dragon is an absolutely solid RTS, with massive scale modern combat, and all the memes that come with it. But Hub, I hear you saying, what about the Naval Combat?
I want you to subscribe to me.
Scav Merchant Hub.
On YouTube, thank you, cringe. Bye.